Hello, everyone. So my name is Nancy Giordano, and I've written a lot about what it takes to what I describe as play bigger, right? What are the organizations? How do they think? How do they show up in a way that I think holds us all well? So that is what we will be centering this conversation on. To be more specific, we talk about the path to profit or shareholder value, quote unquote, versus stakeholders, right? We would like to not have this be necessarily a tug of war between the two. But as AI has become more ingrained in sectors that directly impact people's lives, the question of monetization, right, and social impact certainly becomes increasingly essential that we actually talk about it and have a tremendous amount of intention around that. And business in particular, right, as an entity in market-based economies is seen as the most efficient and effective way of being able to drive innovation and distribute innovation. So there's a lot of responsibility that sits on businesses' shoulders to be able to do so thoughtfully. And maintaining trust in this world and in this environment becomes increasingly, it should always be paramount, but it's certainly at the forefront when we think about the fact that it's not just about our customers, but it's also about having employees that want to come work with us, partners that want to work with us, investors who want to invest with us, communities that want us to do business in their neighborhoods, right? So how do we ensure that we're building the kinds of organizations in the future that people want to work with? So what does it take to ensure both relevance economically and have a social license to operate in the world of exponential tech? To be able to dive into that, again, the group has assembled a really experienced panelist. I'll start on my right, my friend Brian, who I've actually known for over 15 years. Chief AI strategist for the Linux Foundation, and has had a career that's committed to accelerating business and progress through global coordination, right? How can we coordinate our resources and our efforts better to be able to accelerate to the future that we want? On my right, I've got Letitia Caletu, Managing Director and responsible AI lead for EMEA for Accenture. And she was also appointed to the European Commission in 2018 as part of the AI expert group that created the recent EU AI Act, which became law, right, on August 2nd here in the EU, or there in the EU. And is the first comprehensive regulation on AI in the world. And will be setting really a standard for many of us. We're all looking at that and seeing how it plays out. And Accenture is also a key collaborator to the World Economic Forum on the topic of AI governance, and I think you'll pull some of that into this conversation, so thank you for all the work that you do to keep us safe. Then we've got my friend Kung-Young Park, chairman of the ECAU, which is a user-centric AI forum with a long history of designing and deploying AI-driven direct transaction economies. So really thinking about a whole new way in which AI allows us to be able to think about commerce and business into the future. And finally on my left, we've got Mikael May, who's head of data analytics and AI for Siemens, who in the book that I did write, I wrote a lot about Siemens as an example of someone who I think is really trying to thread this path brilliantly. So thank you for being here as well. A big round of applause for the panelists and a little energy in this afternoon as we dive in. Thank you. So again, I really do focus my work in thinking a lot about this intersection between profitability and social impact around trust, right? We're given these amazing resources. How do we ensure that business is, again, using those in the most thoughtful ways and that which we want to go do work with them? So there's a lot of different ways we can look at trust or measure trust. Letitia, again, has done some research. It'd be interesting to get hers. One thing that I follow is something called the Edelman Trust Barometer. It's a research study that they do every year in fall, right around October, November. They interview about 32,000 people around the world in 28 countries to determine a barometer of who is sort of meeting their threshold of at least 60% of most trusted entities. And since 2021, business has been the most trusted entity, surprisingly, maybe, for some of us, amongst higher than government, higher than NGOs, higher than my neighbor. The person that we often trust the most, or the entity we trust the most, is business. So that's encouraging for the moment that we're heading into, right, as we think about that. It's starting to slip just a bit. So the question is, why should people be skeptical that businesses would be really able to take this powerful technology into the future, right? And it's because we haven't always lived up to promises that hopefully that stakeholders have had for us. I think you've got a stat about 75%?
77% of consumers wouldn't buy from an ethical brand, yeah.
77? Yeah, so they insist on buying from an ethical brand, right? So they're making a distinction between ethical and non-ethical as they think about that. So then we think about it in terms of specific to AI, right? What are we seeing in the research?
So we do see, obviously, responsible AI being very important in the adoption of AI in companies, with 2% of the CEO kind of putting it on their roadmap for 2025. Only 2% of the CEO kind of having operationalized responsible AI, but acknowledging they need to do that as a priority going forward. So at the moment, a number of companies have already kind of crafted their principle on what responsible AI means. They have an ethical charter, but many companies haven't really translated that into their daily operation. I set up the governance, set up their rescreening process, set up the definition, and really kind of made sure that they can take this from the inception of a project all the way up to production. One other kind of stat that's very key is the fact that we did a survey for Davos, and we interviewed a number of employees, and 95% of the employees of company are very excited about the prospect of AI and generative AI, but actually 95% don't trust their company to do something which is good for them in the process of transformation. So all of this is kind of making this trust element very critical for company to really embrace the next phase of change or value creation. So those elements are
and which has a direct impact on profitability, right? If employees aren't feeling well held inside the organization, that certainly has a drag on productivity and what is possible as we move forward. So the interesting question, as I've been studying this for a long time, is really what is the posture of business, right? How do we show up in this work? And we've been through this conversation way before AI came on the scene, when we were talking about ingredients in food products, or we were thinking about a breakthrough pharmaceutical and how that should be distributed, or we're thinking about social media algorithms, and now here we are with generative AI, and we always end up in this tug of war about doing the right thing or not, short-term versus long-term, right? Stakeholder versus shareholder, sorry. The two different, and we have this as a versus and a tug of war, right? But there's another way of being able to think about business. It's really about having a social license to operate. So Mike, can you talk to us about how the conversation is happening inside the boardroom or inside the C-suite as you have this discussion about how to invest in AI, right? How do we make decisions that hold us all well?
That changed a lot over the years, and for me in surprising ways, I have to say. The turning point at Siemens, I think, was when we committed self-consciously on adopting a number of KPIs for sustainability. So we call it the degree framework. This is things that you would expect, like resource efficiency, but then also ethical principles and diversity principles. And then, since that time, every senior manager is evaluated in his or her performance on how good are we doing on those KPIs. And that changes a lot, either because you like it anyway, or because you see in your bonus, did you good or did you go not good? So that, from that point on, the discussions really changed, and what was often an afterthought, so do we do it in a sustainable manner, is it good for mankind or so, which was maybe in the marketing department, this now became part of the prioritization of projects. So if we do AI, where do we invest, what do we want to do, and how do we match the KPIs? So that was a big turning point, I would say. And then when evaluating, we found out about 90% of our applications at Siemens, I mean, Siemens is an industrial company, have direct impact on sustainability KPIs. So really a lot. It's really exception if it's not relevant. Mostly it is relevant. And maybe to make that a bit more concrete, how it has impact, I give a number of examples. So the first example, maybe data centers. We heard that all over the day. So data centers consume a lot of energy. But you need them to do AI, of course. Now, at least we want to make that more resource efficient and to reduce the energy consumption. consumption. And then in projects like in Estonia, Siemens built a green data center which reduces energy amount by a good degree, by 30%, and then using AI, for example, for controlling the cooling system. And that's one good example how AI can at least help to make the world more sustainable, even if the data centers still consume a lot of energy. Second example, which maybe you would not expect so easily, in the area of simulation. So Siemens is selling simulation software, which is used to design the next car, the next airplane, or the next generation of gas turbines. And if you are in that field, you know that this is very computationally intensive, using classical simulation models. And here we use AI in part to replace or to augment what the traditional simulation is doing, so-called surrogate models. And colleagues from Siemens Energy, when they designed the next generation of blades for the gas turbine, they reported they saved 15,000 hours of computation just for that one piece. And there you can see how much AI can help here also for sustainability. And then as a side effect, it is more resource efficient, so it lasts longer, and it also has less emissions, this new generation. And yeah, then there are many more examples like that. Maybe a final one, in mobility, Siemens is building autonomous trains. And these autonomous trains, they can be operated on a little bit faster scale. And then you can use AI to optimize the schedule, and again, saving energy, and of course, bringing people to public transportation. So there are many ways, and the point I would like to make here on that is in all these applications, really sustainability and AI, they are very good friends. So nowadays we often discuss, here is AI, LLMs or so, here is sustainability, and they clash or they are enemies, but not in this case. So they are very good friends and go together well. And for that reason, also in the board or anywhere else, there's no big discussion. So it's profitability, so shareholders are happy, and environment is also more happy. But that is one side. There are also things where it doesn't go together that well. And I think one thing where you have to see is data, of course. I mean, as a AI person, I would like to take data, all the data I can get my hands on. And Siemens has lots of data for customers for doing service, of course. But here, of course, we made data, so treating data carefully, part of our KPIs for sustainability. And there you have to make compromises. Not everything you can do with data is something you should also do.
Right. Well, and so I think that a part of it also is like there's a governance structure, I think, inside Siemens, right? First of all, very much from the top down, the CEO down, about really setting those kinds of priorities. And my understanding, too, is that you have a couple of at-large board seats that are from the employee pool, right? So anyone that's an employee in Siemens could be on the manufacturing floor, could potentially be serving on the board. So you also have a voice, I think, at the senior level or at the governance level that is thinking about this from multiple perspectives, which I think is a key part that helps ensure that decision making. So as we start to think again about then models and approaches that we can take to this, right? We look at specifically ways in which industries can establish a default level of trust around it. So part of it is that you have good governance inside an organization, part of it is that you've got good regulation, but there's another way in which we can approach this too, Brian. What is your experience with Linux?
Sure. So the Linux Foundation is a consortium of over 2,000 companies who work together on common technology platforms. 70 to 80% of the software that sits inside of a mobile phone or in a smart car or behind a website is pre-existing open source code that is built collaboratively, kind of like the way Wikipedia pages are built. But they depend upon an organization like the Linux Foundation to coordinate the activities between all these different entities. So we have a number of initiatives in artificial intelligence, tools for building AI models that are used by the majority of the model builders out there that involve companies like Meta and IBM and Apple and others, tools for managing data pipelines, tools for managing RAG, all sorts of things that are bits and pieces that come together by the vendors and by companies when they provide an AI system to the outside world. And this structure for using open source software and open source collaboration is really how companies we've seen in any technology wave come to trust the underlying technology bits. They're willing to bank their business on this underlying technology because they can have transparency into how it's built and they can participate in steering the direction of where it heads and they know that they're not dependent on a single vendor for their future business. No one's going to pull the rug out from underneath them. And so what we've seen is a tremendous interest in ensuring that the future of AI is decentralized, that it is about empowering companies globally to be able to build on top of these common shared bits, and so that we're not uniquely dependent on a few small, large AI companies for all of the deployments, all the kinds of apps that we want to build. And we're really at the heart of many of these different kinds of projects.
Do you want to give us a couple of tangible examples that are either in the consumer world or in the business world?
So you're all familiar, for example, with Meta and their release of the open source Llama models. Actually, they're more open weights is the more appropriate term. But they also were involved in the launch of PyTorch, again, this engine for building models out of raw data. They originally launched it as a Meta-specific project that under their brand, under their, they were still public about it. But IBM came along and said, we'd like to invest $100 million into further development of PyTorch to make it faster, make it able to consume more data, all sorts of improvements. But they weren't willing to do that into a Meta-owned property. They needed that project to be housed at a neutral location, even when it was still going to see investment from IBM, from Meta. And in doing this, they wanted to open up and share the research and development burden with every other company that was a user, an advanced user of the PyTorch platform. And so in doing that, not only was a tremendous amount of money saved, and really a reference standard for how to build AI models became really the heart of this project, we were able to move faster than otherwise than any of the companies individually could. And we now have a trustworthy platform for building these AI systems.
We're going to come back to the complexity thing at the very end of this conversation, because I think that part of it is that the decision-making then becomes, you could argue, more complex or more refined or somehow more sophisticated, right, as we think about how we would partner. And then there's a whole other opportunity, right?
Yeah.
You got Park, you've been very patient, right, to share with us that now in this world of AI-led business, there's a whole different way that we can think about it. And for me, the analogy was back in the day when the internet was emerging and people thought we could just take the encyclopedia and just put it into digital form and just throw it on with the same business model. And we missed, early days, the opportunity for all of us to contribute to Wikipedia, right? And we would do it without getting paid financially for it. We still wanted to contribute. So our thinking around our agency, our capacity to be part of this economy is different, as you now are ushering in a whole new way of business.
Sure. A good example of Korean venture companies, Harex Importex, AI agent economy model, AI agent transaction model that connects sellers and consumers directly through AI. The AI direct transaction commerce model is a win-win system where the transaction cost typically taken by monopolistic platform companies are instead shared among sellers, consumers, and an AI model operator, all benefiting according to the principles of free market competition. With this model, sellers can increase their profitability while consumers gain more purchasing power by purchasing desired product at lower cost. This leads to an increase in overall consumption and production for society. As a result, the entire society can achieve high economic growth by eliminating inflation pressure. The AI direct transaction system is a unique, open, universal business model where all participants voluntarily engage based on their own economic incentives. Sellers recommend AI for direct transaction to their customers, collectively grow the network. It is a low-risk, high-return business model. So I firmly believe that this model can generate returns of more than 10x or even 100x for investors. With an investment of US $10 billion, we can scale this model to 100 countries, establishing a seamless global connectivity framework. So we are in discussion with various global investors for this fund. The key to this success of the AI direct transaction economic model is for government, entrepreneurs, and all social leaders in each country to understand and actively promote this model, allowing sellers to trust that it is viable and encouraging their active participation. We hope that the early establishment of the AI direct transaction economic model will allow the entire human society grow, develop, and prosper together. This represents a realization of better capitalism, making money by helping others make more money. That's what I
There you
want.
go. Path to profit for everyone.
Yeah.
And this is hard to reduce in just a 2-minute answer, so I don't know if you can do this, but the markets that you're looking at to grow, this is currently in Korea, Indonesia is interested, but the part that I was really fascinated by is that your growth market, your target market is?
Yeah, right now in Korea, we deploy this AI direct transaction model nationwidely, and I'm going to expand Africa and Indonesia with Asian countries and all over the developing countries, not only the developing countries, but also advanced countries like Europe and America, everywhere.
Oh, I know. Well, I know you want to take over the whole world, but I'm just saying that Africa is really in
Yes,
your
yes.
sight. So, which leads to the last sort of serious question or thoughtful question, which is around how can government and business coordinate, right? How can they ensure that private sector companies are able to get the most collaborative relationship with government to ensure that we're bringing these resources to bear? So we'll start with a little bit about what you're doing maybe in Africa, and then you guys can all jump in particular Letitia, about how do government and private entities work more collaboratively together?
Yeah, government, they have to promote this business model. It is feasible business model, and then they engage actively to persuade all the participants for their own.
Right. So they become
business
advocates for it
Yes.
and sort of trusted resources. Mike, you want to talk about your relationship with the government entities and how you guys?
Yeah, I mean, it's of course very important for the companies that there is enough research on AI and sustainability. And so what I would like to see even more than like we see is invest in this topic. Sustainability, the young people love it. It's meaningful. It's about saving the planet. On the other hand, you can learn a lot about AI. There are tons of open problems, and there are many areas of sustainability where the business model is not so clear right now. And that's a great area for pre-development,
Right.
for investing, and then harvesting and getting shareholder value later. So it's a great area to do that. Also, a little bit of regulation in that area, I think, can help, but just not too much. It's,
How much regulation is the right amount of regulation, Letitia?
I think regulation is a good thing. We have noticed in Europe that people needed some legal certainty sometime to actually push their AI innovation to production. So the EU AI Act and some of the work we've done at the EU has been, providing this certainty and the level playing field as well for all the companies to be adhering to. So I think it is welcome by a number of companies. Obviously, you don't want to hamper innovation. So the EU AI Act, for example, is kind of saying AI is not good or bad, is how you use it. That needs to be regulated. And it's anticipated that only 5 to 10% of the use cases will actually fall in the high-risk category for the EU. So I think it's a good thing. It's been very targeted to high-risk systems, so any system that potentially can have an impact on the human right, on societal safety. So it's super targeted. There's also exemption on R&D, for example, to make sure that innovation, can still happen. And there's a number of exemptions as well for SMEs and startups. Yeah. So I think regulation is good because it gives the clarity for a number of companies and on legal certainty, so they can go and embrace. And there, it's very targeted in the EU to protecting some fundamental rights. Yeah.
But even the regulation that you have just passed, my assumption would be that it is still dynamic, right? We're still learning in early days, and it's not going to be like this is set in stone and everything is...
Exactly. So the EU AI office, so there's also an acknowledgement that regulation in the old days used to be very fixed and then enforced. There's an acknowledgement from the European Commission and the EU AI office that this is going to evolve, yeah? So there's a number of addendum that are already on clarification that are being, published. But there's also a scientific board which is there to kind of help, make key decision when there's point of tension. So it's acknowledged that, regulating AI is more of a dynamic dynamic thing. But I think having some clear articulation of a framework is very good for consumers because you can trust people would have actually thought about your human right, but it's good for companies as well because it gives them legal certainty that, there's not going to be any major backlash. And there's a number of vehicles to make it much easier. Like, for example, there's a sandbox for trying things up and things like that.
This just goes back to the whole mindset that I think that we need to be able to be in such an explosive and, as we were talking before, about probabilistic future, right? It's not a plug and play. It is not deterministic. This is much more. This is growing. It is learning. It is taking in new information constantly. And I think, just, Brian, to close us out, the mindset that people need to be able to adopt this kind of new approach, like where are you helping maybe either where you're seeing the hurdle or where you're seeing the encouraging news that people are open to this way of thinking.
Yeah, and actually building on the last question about regulatory, let me take a dive really shortly in a non-AI space, which is digital identity. In the European Union, there's been a lot of move towards digital identity credentials and verifiable credentials that can be portable across borders. They've passed a number of laws recently that are going to mandate European member states to publish credentials under a certain format. And they're moving to ask the governments of those states to publish wallets in the app stores to make them available. Here's your official German wallet, your official Italian wallet. You can hold your ID, your passport, your driver's license, your academic credentials, and be able to present them as you move around. And the European Union has said, here's the standards, but here's funding to enable the member states and vendors in that area to build compatible wallets, right? Likewise, in AI, we're starting to see, obviously, government funding of AI research. A lot of that research ends up creating software as a natural byproduct to demonstrate the principles. But what we really need to see are investments from governments in creating digital public goods, collections of content and data that can be used to train models, particularly in local languages, to local customs, but then also do a lot of capacity building in regions, right, around how to use the software, how to improve it, how to really weave it into government systems, but also the private sector, so that it acts as an uplift. It acts as a capacity builder and can really accelerate innovation in a region as well as globally.
It is so clear that everyone's life's work is very much present in what you are doing now. So you've got like a significant amount of experience sitting on the stage right now, and we want to be able to go into so much more depth around all of it. I will just retreat us, as we always talk about the future, sometimes we go to the past. There was a US president back in 1923 or to 1929, Calvin Coolidge, a Republican at the time, who said this, which I think is a good guide as we head to the future. No enterprise can exist for itself alone. It ministers to some great need, it performs some great service, not for itself, but for others. Or failing therein, it ceases to be profitable and ceases to exist. So with that, I say good luck with all of your businesses. Hopefully you find this guideline. Thank you to our panelists for being here with us today. And thank you all for your attention.
Hello, thank you all. This is going to be an interesting discussion. This is about something we all care about. It's about our jobs. Are we going to keep it? What's going to happen to our jobs and our kids' future? So I would like to start with a question, and I'll ask the panel while they are introducing themselves. How is this AI revolution different from the other revolution? We had the industrial revolution, we had internet revolution. Why this one is different? Start with you.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction. I'm Mohammed Hassani. I'm a professor at KAUST. What makes it different is AI is getting in an interesting shape. It's becoming an increasing part of our life. That's not necessarily the case. So we are using, everyone here probably used AI at least once a day. I would bet on this. So most people are right now making this part of their life. It's impacting, has a potential to impact healthcare, education. It's also impacting our society and has a potential to impact our society in many different ways. And we need to also, due to the changes in this job market, for example, we need to educate our kids in a way to be prepared for this. The creation of cryptocurrency, for example, is a market that has been created due to this electronic innovations and software innovations. But I think it's going to change our society in many different ways, and we need to prepare for this. So, for example, at some point in the history, photography was invented, and then artists at that point was only depicting pictures of families or something like that. And then they thought that may no longer have jobs, for example. But what happened is that the artists started to create new modes of expression like cubism and things like that. So I think there are some opportunities, but in the meantime, there are some things that we need to think about, regulations, what's the right and bad use of AI and things like that, and how do you prepare for this paradigm shift?
Thank you. Nancy?
Hi, I'm Nancy Giordano. I describe my work right now as an exponential strategist, and I think that's really the big shift, is that we're moving out of what I would call the industrial era altogether. So I think I don't describe it as the fourth or fifth industrial age, because I think it's just so much more powerful, because you have this whole stack of technologies that are emerging and converging together as opposed to just one. And so I describe it as the exponential productivity transformation. We describe it as XPT. Which is a mouthful and probably never will catch on as a phrase, but it helps for myself and my team to think about this in this much more robust and much more extraordinary way.
Ray?
Hi, I'm Ray Wong. I'm with Constellation Research. We're a Silicon Valley-based research company. I think this is different. When we think about the internet age, it was open, it was decentralized, things were cheaper, we had a lot of players. This is closed, this is centralized. This is more expensive, and only a few will win. And I think that last statement is important, because only a few will win means we have to work doubly hard to make sure that jobs are going to be there. We actually continue to operate at a machine-level scale, at a human scale, and bringing those two areas together. And that's going to be the big challenge going forward, is how do we do that? And then I think the second thing is we keep thinking about the world in terms of automation and where AI is going to come up. But the real question we have to ask is, when and where do we insert a human in that decision automation process? That part is going to be more important than any other piece in this era.
Wow, and can I just jump in 1 second and say I think it's absolutely not going to be the only a few win. I think that this is a chance to actually make it so much more open and so much more accessible for so many people.
Oh no, we have to make that happen.
Right.
But it's heading in that direction unless we do something.
Right, okay, fair.
Excellent. Yeah, so this is really a totally different paradigm. I mean, basically, we're not talking about industrial revolution or others. Basically, it's a huge change because it's targeting us as a human. It's called artificial intelligence. It's targeting our intelligence and may really change the job market. And this is where the next question and the title of this panel, is it all lost? Ray?
I don't think it's all lost if we design it not to be. But it is a very high probability if we don't put in the guardrails in place. And I say that as a free market capitalist. But there is a role where we actually have to make sure that the jobs that we replace, the jobs that are created, that some kind of balance is there. Our challenge is we don't know where it's going to head, and so we actually have to learn different sets of skills, which I think you're going to talk about. And I think it's really important that we actually change the way we educate folks, and we change the way we look at value sets. But we also are responsible creating new market systems, new ecosystems, so that people can thrive. And I think that's a role where every government is going to have to grasp where they want to play and where they're going to let the private sector be successful. So I think the rules have to be written, but the rules can't be static. They're going to have to be very dynamic.
Nancy?
To jump in. So I make a distinction between the future of work and the future of working. Those to me are very different concepts, and the future that we often are talking about is the future of working. How will we work? Will we be augmented or not? Will we work for 5 days a week or 3 days a week? Will we, work remotely or not work remotely? Like, these are all conversations about how we're working, assuming that the same kind of work will still exist if I get reskilled or not reskilled. But the idea is that it's still under a paradigm of I'm working for somebody else, and we're just going to try and figure out how the jobs are going to shift and change. And I think that even if we can imagine reskilling everybody for whatever this AI and other exponential technology world will be, the reality is everyone ready to be reskilled? And the answer is no, right? Companies that have actually invested a lot of time and money in upskilling and reskilling are still seeing a large proportion of their workforce not either take up the opportunity, not feel ready for that, not feel confident for that, not feel whatever it is, right? So you've got a big group of people who I think are going to be left out of even that conversation. And right now, we're trying to hold on to jobs that people aren't even satisfied by. If you go and look at the statistics, right, 70% of the people are disengaged with the work that they're doing. I think it's 18% right now, at least in the US, are actively disengaged with the work that we're doing, the social contract around whether or not they feel the job is secure, they can really invest in it, it's got their back. Like, all that is falling apart already. So I think trying to hold on to that just with a new version of reskilling is less useful than really thinking about the concept of work itself. What does work mean in society? How much of it is paid versus unpaid? One of the big conversations I have, right, is that in my world, I've got 5 roles, only 2 of which are paid, and 3 of which are not, but they're just as valuable, right? Certainly being a mom was one of those things, being a TEDx organizer was one of those things. Like, there are different reasons that we do what we do. So if you imagine an economy with $10.7 trillion or more of unpaid care work not being considered work, but is, right? I think there's a whole conversation about how we really rethink what does the future of work look like, and how do we distribute productivity, which will continue to increase, in more equitable and more interesting ways so that we can all have a thriving future.
Professor Mohammed?
So I think the key issue that we are addressing here is how do we make AI more aligned with human goals? So I think the key problem is how do we make sure that any AI we develop in the future is serving human goals, whether that be education. So how we build AI so that a big problem right now in our schools that kids can use ChatGPT, for example, to solve homeworks. But this does not contribute to the very goal of developing the skill set of the children. So how do we develop AI models so that it can complement our life, it can accelerate our practice, it can help us do more, diagnose diseases, and help children do more and gain the skill set, and how do we do that in a way that serves this goal and align with our goals, I think is the main problem. It's not, I think the problem of the AI is not, can be a technology that we can embrace in this way, but if we designed it in a way that it always does not contradict and complements human values or serving human values, I think we are in good shape. How do we do that? I think that's a big challenge.
I was actually saying, if we look at work, right, we have 7 categories of jobs that we actually think are going to be more automation or more human-led, right? So highly repetitive work, things that are mind-numbing, that's going to have a lot of automation. But you also need that training as a human to see patterns. And so the question is, how do you learn that? Lots of volume, that's going to be an area where you're overwhelmed. There's just too much stuff that you can handle. Lots of nodes of interaction, you get distracted. You can only do 2 or 3 things in order. Some people are good multitaskers, maybe 5, but 500 at the same time is very, very difficult, right? And when we get to areas where you need to get to human scale or massive scale, that's going to be very hard. But areas around complexity are very interesting. Some things are too complex for humans to make the calculation, But then again, some things are too complex that we don't even have algorithms for. And that's where we're going to see some interesting areas where jobs are going to require human decision-making, human judgment. Creativity is another great one. We're really good at making the rules, but we're even better at breaking the rules. And that's what machines aren't very good at, trying to think outside of the box and the lines. And then the other area around physical presence, some things times you want a human, sometimes you don't because it may be too dangerous, and we're going to create those choices. So thinking about it in that way will help you figure out how you go through augmentation, acceleration, automation, agents, which you're going to hear a lot about this year, and advisors ultimately in the back end. And that's a framework for maturity that's going to happen. And then that's where you figure out when and where you insert the human.
But the question is, how do we make decisions about where machines need to be replaced in a way that serves human goals? So I met an artist previously, and she said, I want robots to help me do my laundry, but I don't want machines to do art for me. That's my form, my very form of expression, right?
I don't know. The value sets, right? Every culture is going to have different value sets where they put them into play.
Yeah, and I might want to have like a new piece of art created every time I walk into my house because it will reflect the mood and the day that I've had, and I would love for the AI to be able to go create that, right? But I love to do laundry because it just is sort of like, my friend calls it kitchen and ashes work. It's just lets my mind wander while I go fold laundry, right? And lets me think about cool ideas. So I think that we aren't going to have like one way of doing any of this stuff. I just think that in general, the idea that any job that either a robot can do or an AI can do, the question will be, is that really a human job? And are we trying to hold on to jobs so that we can protect an economic system that we may have outgrown, right? If you think about the history of the sewing machine, the people who first invented it or almost invented it, right? When they finally discovered how to do it, they were like, oh no, we're going to put all the seamstresses out of business, and they shut it down and they tried to hide the patent for a certain amount of time until the third person came along and realized, wait a second, now people can have 10 shirts instead of one shirt, and we can create a huge industry around it. So I am all pro that technology. I'm all pro that things that technology can do. If you read Ray Kurzweil's new book about the singularity is nearer, you'll believe that there's a whole set of nanobots that will surround our neocortex and create all kinds of superpowers that we as humans can't even imagine that we have yet. So how do we prepare economically for that kind of world is, I think, the question. And I just think that we haven't built the scaffolding for this new era that we're heading into. Right? When we head into the industrial era, we built an education system because that didn't exist before. We created regulations around environmental protection. We made sure that children didn't work in factories. So, we did all kinds of scaffolding to make sure that that worked. We haven't built any scaffolding for this new exponential world that we're heading into. And I think that's the conversation that we should have when we start talking about the future of work and working.
Yeah, and now's the time to actually do that. You're
Absolutely.
at the beginning of this process. We're at the very beginning of this. And you have an opportunity to build that scaffolding in this room. And I think you should think about what the implications are from both the political, take the classic futurist model, political, economic, societal, environmental, technology, and legislative perspective. That pestle model is perfect for the scaffolding today. The other piece I would add is different. You have to actually make a decision whether you're going to be in a culture of scarcity or a culture of abundance. And think about that as one axis. And then think about the other axis as, are we very centralized or decentralized? I advocate for decentralized abundance, which allows humanity to be free to think about ideas, create opportunities. But AI can also be used in a dangerous way where it's centralized scarcity, which is also the balance you're going to want to think about.
Well, that leads us to our next question is about the AI revolution is moving very fast. And how ready are we to reskill our workforce? And what do you guys think we should do, and both from government and private sector?
Fahad, I'll have my AI talk to your AI. It's moving way too fast. So that's the challenge. Like, how do we operate at human scale when we have machine scale operations? And that's going to be a challenge that we have to ask. Today, when we do automated trading with algorithms, right, and something goes crazy and the market drops 3%, well, we take a break. We pause the system to calm, reset the algorithms, and go to place. We're going to need some kind of controls like this to catch up because it is moving very quickly. And so in order to keep up, we're going to actually have to make sure that it's not just continuously learning, continuous skilling. We actually have to find a way to actually consume this at human scale.
It's funny, and we think about it in terms of how do you put the digital, or the human cloud, the human inside the digital, right? So how do we become more and more human?
Yes.
How do we increase our consciousness? How do we increase our compassion for one another? How do we increase our ability to be able to really tune into our own inner voice, understand our values? Like, it's like we're going really, really deeply more in as a human to be able to then, again, make partly the ethical decisions, partly have confidence in a world that's constantly shifting and changing, right? If you don't do the inner work, you get really triggered the minute that something starts to look less secure and you don't make decisions in real time and are able to sense and respond to situations. And so we're really focusing much more on the, like, again, how do I build capacity as a human to be able to be inside this digital cloud? I think that that's part of
It's the Star Trek data problem.
Right? Yeah, right? But I think that the more that we can tune into this part, right, and the more that we can actually also realize, you know, again, I can get really woo-woo and talk about like bigger connections that we have to one another. Another friend of mine just wrote a book called We Are Agora, How Humans Are Becoming Superorganisms, right? So
Byron Reese.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good friend of ours.
Yes.
We're realizing we have a lot of mutual friends here. We've never met, but suddenly we have a very
First time we've
big
met.
overlap. But Byron has a new book called We Are Agora that really makes the case for the fact that as we're living in more dense areas and as we've got this ability to connect through large language models and accelerated AI, we're developing our own capacity the same way bees in a hive do, that are bigger than the individual, but the actual hive, organism of humanity itself, has a different role that it's playing. So really thinking through these, you know, new paradigms in more exciting ways, I think is the opportunity here.
Without being the Borg. Without being the Borg.
Yeah, I'm very anti-Borg.
I'm anti-Borg too.
So 15, 20 years from now, what the job scene look like? What kind of jobs will probably, let me rephrase the question. So if I have my kids right now, what should I teach them for the next 15 to 20 years?
I think we need to came to a realization that AI will become only an increasingly part of our life. So I think we need to build the AI. With that realization, we know that human plus AI will always be more powerful than human alone. So we're putting our kids at a disadvantage of not learning how to use AI. How do we teach our AI and integrate that in our curriculum to help improve the skills of the student? I think we will figure out a path to do this, but we need to start actually now. Being aware of the negative impact of this. We don't want them to use AI at the cost of them developing their skill sets. So I think if that was cautiously, this kind of integration of AI systems into our education, if it has been cautiously developed, if it would be very cautiously developed, it could be really beneficial and it will help us up-level our skill set of having children that can make this AI more impactful. But in the meantime, with this broad statement in alignment with what we see is right for the society.
Nancy?
You know, I just have such faith in humanity and our ability to be able to create and contribute to one another and be liberated from the tyranny of having to make a certain amount of income to be able to have my basic needs met would be a really, to me, a hugely liberating force. If you read Kai-Fu Lee's AI 2041, he's got these 10 different scenarios, like science fiction stories that start dystopian and end up pretty protopian at the end. So I agree with him, this idea of that being able to be liberated to go create whatever it is that I want to do to contribute to society feels to me like a very exciting moment in time. And so for me, again, it's how do we rethink the distribution of productivity to make that possible? And then how do we ensure that we have the capacity to take that responsibility and thrive in it as opposed to feel like crumbling? So for me, educating is around curiosity, empathy, agency, grit, and integrity. And if all those things are things that we're baking into our children from day one, then they have the capacity to actually be amazing contributors to society moving ahead.
Yeah, I was going to agree with everybody here on the panel, and I think in addition to that, there's a practical aspect that's important, right? We want our children to be able to make enough so that they can be able to live, but we also want them to be able to find a purpose and be intellectually stimulated or emotionally stimulated or find some kind of spiritual stimulation. And I think that's going to be the hard part because we're going to be redefining what humanity looks like. I have a son, he's a comp sci major at Duke. He's comp sci and econ. And he went through a bunch of internships. One was really product management 1 year. He did product marketing and engineering another year. This year I said, go do something different. Go do sales, go do BD, do partnerships. Find out what you really like. And I think giving them the luxury to find things that they're going to enjoy, I think that's going to be the important part. And then actually have a core base that they can actually make some money with and be able to live to a level that they're happy with. So I think it's going to be a very different question for everybody, but I want my kids to be happy.
Okay. So last quick question for everybody. What jobs are at high risk and what jobs at minimum risk?
High risk, accounting, legal, anything with a structure I can put into an LLM is at risk. But it doesn't mean you still won't have jobs there. The question is, where will you need human decision making?
Yeah, and I think we just recently, we run a monthly gathering called The New Story, and so we featured Grimes recently with a video that she had done. She's a musician who said that basically she's hoping that all music becomes democratized, like access to the tools. The way she thinks about it is the universe is a very quiet place and it needs to be filled with music, and the more that people have access to the tools, the more that people can contribute to it. So for me, it's like all jobs that are, again, repetitive or uninteresting, but even creative jobs are quote unquote at risk if you look at it through an economic model, but all of that capacity is there dormant, waiting to be released if we can think about it through a different economic lens.
I think there are some jobs that has been impacted already, like self-driving cars right now are already operating in San Francisco, Waymo, and as well as Cruise, for example, are making huge progress in this industry. So this is obviously impacting this sector of jobs. But in the meantime, on the other side, I think AI is also an amplifying power. It helps us, for example, if I can do maybe 10x more work while having the same quality. If I have a high quality work, there are some, for example, regions. Let's say if you have a system that we built recently, and also that's called Mini-GPT Med, which is a step towards accelerating radiology practice. There are some underrepresented regions where this technology might help diagnosis or something like that. So when healthcare is not this far less accessible. So I think we need to realize that AI definitely will, when it can excel, can amplify what we can do. We can do it 10 to 100 times more. But in the meantime, we need to realize that this will come at a cost, that maybe less people will do the same thing. I think I heard also about this idea that we are coming into an era where we'll have single-person CEOs, because it's becoming more possible right now to create agents that works for you. You can create an LLM agent, not only LLMs that can read and understand text, but LLMs that can make decisions, look at the stock market, buy something. I ask it to, for example, I want to go to this party, compose an outfit for me and things like that. So you can as a personal, you have much more power to do more stuff. I believe no matter how humanity changes, the impact we introduce to...
Okay, Mohammed, we're running out of time.
Yeah, so it's based on...
I would like to thank all the panel. Thank you all.